Part 2, Key 4, Understanding How the Earth Was Created. It may seem as if what I'm advocating here is a worldview that is similar to the one presented by most religions for thousands of years on this planet. This, however, is not the case. If you look at especially Western Christianity, you will see that this religion is based, as is all of the so-called monotheistic religions, on a fundamentally dualistic worldview. Christianity makes it clear that the world can be divided into two separate and distinct spheres, namely the material world and the heaven world. Christianity also makes it clear that there is an impenetrable barrier between the two worlds, so that only people who live up to a certain conditions will be allowed to enter the kingdom of God. Although it is not my intention here to go into a deeper description about the shortcomings of this dualistic worldview, I will point out a very simple reality. The dualistic worldview presented by the Christian religion in the name of Christ is in direct opposition to the non-dualistic worldview presented by Jesus himself. Jesus did not say that there was an impenetrable barrier between the heaven world and the world in which you live. Jesus was killed by the orthodox religious people of his time precisely because he challenged the worldview that says that there is a barrier, and therefore you can enter the kingdom of heaven only by living up to certain conditions defined by an external religious authority on earth. If you look at monotheistic religions, and even many other religions in the world, you will see a distinct pattern. They all present the view that you are separated from God by an impenetrable barrier, a barrier that you cannot go through on your own power. Yet there is a way for you to get through the pearly gate into the kingdom of heaven, but only if you blindly follow the leaders of the external religion. This is the view that Jesus challenged when he said that the kingdom of God is at hand and that the kingdom of God is within you. Do you see that in this foundational statement, often overlooked, ignored, or interpreted away by Christian preachers, Jesus challenged the dualistic worldview? Instead, he said that there is no fundamental barrier between you and God's kingdom, because the only real barrier is found in your own consciousness. It is possible for you to enter the kingdom of heaven by going within yourself and doing what Jesus told all people to do, namely to stop looking at the splinter in the eyes of their brothers and instead look for the beam in their own eye. Can you begin to sense that this is not a dualistic worldview? What Jesus gave was a view which says that you are not separated from God's kingdom by any external barrier. In fact, you are not separated from God's kingdom at all. For did not Jesus say, "I and my Father are one"? So you see, what Orthodox Christianity has done is essentially the same that the priests of the materialistic religion are attempting to do today, namely to say that you are confined to the material universe and that your mind does not have the power to go beyond the material universe on its own. The religious authorities said that you have no ability to know truth on your own, and therefore you should blindly believe in their doctrines. And the priests of materialism are likewise saying that you cannot know truth on your own, and therefore you should blindly follow their doctrines, which they claim are not doctrines but are based on the undeniable, indisputable, and objective findings of science. Yet it is not objective to look at the world through a materialistic instrument and fail to see anything beyond the material world, and then interpret this as proof that there is nothing beyond the material realm. This is not objective science. This is a political interpretation that is no different in nature than many of the doctrines constructed by medieval Catholic theologians in order to control the minds of the people. Do you see that if you look at world history, there has always been a small elite who has been seeking to control the population? And the most effective way to control the population is not through physical force, but through mental force by controlling people's minds and thinking. And thus this power elite has always been seeking to force people to limit their imagination, to limit their thinking, their reasoning, their intuition, to the mental box defined by the system constructed by the elite, be it a religious, a political, or a scientific, materialistic system. Now, I'm not hereby trying to say that all of the people who are advocating a particular system as the ultimate source of truth have an evil intent, or even that they are knowingly seeking to control the thinking of people. Many of these people are indeed well-meaning, but they do not understand that they are being used by a small elite who is intent on controlling every aspect of life on this planet. And thus it is understandable that many scientists will balk at what I am saying here and will indeed deny that they are in any way seeking to control people's thinking. Yet the deeper reality here is that being well-meaning is not the same as being aware of what one is doing in a larger context. There is an event horizon, an observation horizon beyond which you cannot see. But there is also a psychological equivalent of this observation horizon, which is the fact that there are certain things people are not willing to see, even though they might be capable of seeing it, either with their physical eyes or with the deeper senses of the mind itself. You will see, for example, that medieval Catholic leaders were fully capable of looking through a telescope and observing the movements of the stars in the sky, the very same movements observed by Galileo, Kepler, and other early astronomers. Yet they were not willing to see that these findings invalidated the Catholic doctrine that the earth was the center of the universe, and therefore the earth was extremely important to God and to God's plan for the universe. Likewise, you will see that there are scientists or scientifically minded people who are not willing to look beyond the observation horizon defined by the materialistic paradigm. They are not willing to look at the findings of quantum physics and realize and acknowledge that these findings have proven that there is indeed something beyond the material universe. And therefore the fundamental doctrine of materialism has been disproven as effectively as the fundamental Catholic doctrine about the earth being the center of the universe. This then brings us to a dividing line. I need you to start considering whether your upbringing has imposed an observation horizon upon your mind, beyond which you are reluctant to venture. It is possible that as you grew up in whatever society and culture you encountered, your mind has been programmed to take certain things for granted and consider them to be such self-evident truths that there is no reason to question them, no reason to look beyond them. Why is this so essential for you to consider this idea? I have said from the very beginning that this book is aimed at those who have the potential to awaken and become part of the solution, part of the people who will bring humanity to a new and higher level of awareness that will then allow humanity to transcend some of the physical limitations and problems that you currently see on Mother Earth. Yet what is the basis for you becoming one of these forerunners? How can you help humankind transcend the old level of consciousness if you have not yourself transcended that level of consciousness first? And how can anyone transcend a certain level of consciousness without going beyond the observation horizon, the mental box defined by the old level of consciousness? My beloved, consider what I mean when I talk about a certain level of consciousness, and let us use an obvious example that I have mentioned before. If you go back around 500 years on the European continent, virtually every human being on the continent accepted the ideas that the earth was a flat disk and that it was the center of the universe. You may look back today and think that this was a ridiculously limited worldview. You may even reason that medieval people therefore were ignorant or less intelligent than you are today. I will not deny that there has been somewhat of a growth in the intelligence level of humankind as a whole, which means that there are people in today's world who have a higher level of intelligence than the people of the medieval times. Yet it would be extremely naive to believe that the medieval people in general were more stupid than people today. There were many people in medieval times whose intelligence was far beyond that of the average population of today. And yet, when you go back to medieval society, you will see that even the most intelligent people in the population believed in these ideas of a flat earth and an earth-centered universe. Why did they believe in these ideas? Simply because they had been brought up to see them as so self-evident that there was no reason to question them. They had therefore simply accepted these ideas and had then gone on with what they saw as their life's mission, whatever that might have been. And so what you see is that it took a few individuals who were willing to question what hardly anyone else questioned in order to bring society out of the mental box and up from the level of consciousness represented by medieval society. And even after the few started questioning these unquestionable paradigms, it took quite some time before the population at large began to open their minds to the possibility that these unquestionable truths needed to be questioned. And actually it took that the old generation passed away before there was a widespread acceptance of the idea, or should we say the reality, that the earth is round. Yet in today's world, there is the potential that many more people can awaken much more quickly and therefore bring society to a new level of awareness more quickly than it happened in medieval times. If you have read this book up until this point, you should count yourself among the people who have the potential to become part of this shift of awareness. Yet in order for that potential, your personal potential, to become a manifest reality, you need to open your mind to the need to question some of the paradigms, some of the self-evident truths that you have grown up to believe. You need to open your mind to the need to question the unquestionable, to realize that the self-evident may not be as evident when you take a closer look, but may indeed either be an incomplete or a completely incorrect view of reality. Let me now explain to you an even deeper layer of why this is so important. Let me begin by explaining to you how planet Earth was actually created. A very long time ago, in a country far, far away, as many fairy tales begin, there was a group of beings who came together and decided to exercise their creative powers in creating a new solar system. My beloved, you may have grown up taking for granted the planet upon which you live, the sun that gives you light and life, and the solar system that allows your planet to stay at a distance from the sun that makes material life possible. Yet I can assure you that starting with nothing and creating such an intricately balanced system is not an easy task. First of all, you need a driving force, which is the equivalent of your physical sun. This driving force was represented by two beings who had attained a very high level of consciousness. These beings had not attained that level of consciousness in the sphere in which the material universe is found. They had attained it in a previous sphere, and they had attained that level of consciousness by helping to bring that sphere to the ascension point, where it became a self-sufficient, self-sustaining aspect of the Creator's unfolding world of form. These beings had then volunteered to lay down their attainment in the bringing forth of the very next sphere in which the material universe is found. Because of their attainment, they were able to become the open doors between the higher sphere and the newly created sphere that has not yet reached the ascension point and become self-sustained, self-luminous. You see, when a new sphere is created, it is created by the beings in the sphere that has just ascended. It is created by them extending their own beings to form the spiritual energy or substance that is the very basis for creating the new sphere. You will notice from your own world that even physical movements have two aspects. There is momentum, which is the driving force that causes an object to move. And then there is direction, which is the information that directs the movement of the object in a certain direction or to a certain result. You see then that when a sphere has gone through the process of the ascension, there are beings in that sphere who have reached a level of consciousness where they become self-luminous. They become able to tap into the flow of the Creator's being that is sustaining the world of form. These beings become the open doors through which the river of life, that is the Creator's being, can flow into the next sphere that is being created. The material universe, as we have seen, is created out of a basic substance, a basic form of energy that vibrates within a certain frequency spectrum. Yet contrary to the view presented by traditional religion, this basic substance is not fundamentally different from the substance that makes up the higher realm, what we might call the spiritual realm, or as traditional religion calls it, the heaven world. Instead, the reality is much closer to that discovered by modern science, namely, that there is only one basic substance, call it light or energy if you will, that simply vibrates at different levels. So you see the point that when a new sphere is created, it is created from the very same substance found in the newly ascended sphere. Only that substance is now lowered in vibration, so that it enters the vibrational spectrum that makes up the newly created sphere. And even in the newly created sphere, there will be several levels of vibration, so that the material universe is not actually the fullness of your current sphere. The reality is that in your current sphere, there are several levels of vibration, several spectra of vibration beyond the material realm. I will later discuss these levels in more detail because for now my point is to show you the process of how a planet and a solar system is created. What we see now is that for the material universe to even exist, there must be a flow of energy from a higher realm that is lowered in vibration into the spectrum of frequencies that makes up the material universe. This lowering of high-frequency energy into a lower vibrational spectrum is indeed the very driving force that started the process which science today describes as the Big Bang. Yet what science has not yet recognized is the fact that this lowering of energy to the material frequency spectrum was not a one-time event. It is indeed an ongoing, continuous process. If you take an honest look at the entire mindset, the paradigms out of which the theory of the Big Bang came into being, you will see that it is intricately and in very subtle ways affected by the desire to uphold the materialistic paradigm that there is nothing beyond the material universe. Thus, the theory of the Big Bang states that all of the matter and energy found in the current universe had been compressed into such extreme density that it formed a singularity. And then, in the Big Bang event, all of the energy was hurled outwards in a giant explosion. My beloved, this entire worldview is based on a desire to uphold the idea that there is nothing beyond the material universe. It is supported by a law that was formulated centuries ago as what is called the first law of thermodynamics, which says that in any interaction, the total amount of energy is conserved. Yet, if you take a closer look at the first law of thermodynamics, you will see that it was formulated at a time when science was in a much more primitive state than you see today. It was formulated based on the observation of steam engines, which means that it was done before there was even an imagination that it was possible to split the atom and release immense amounts of energy from what is at the time seen as the smallest building blocks of matter. So if you take an honest look at this law, you will see that while it is correct for certain so-called macroscopic events, it cannot be uncritically transferred to what scientists call microscopic events, namely at the level of the atom and subatomic particles. Yet because of the unwillingness to question the materialistic paradigm, few scientists have been willing to question the first law of thermodynamics. Were they indeed willing to question this law and apply current experimental findings and theories, they would see that the first law of thermodynamics indeed does not apply at the level of atoms and subatomic particles, nor does it, for that matter, apply at the cosmological scale of suns, black holes, supernovas, and dark matter. Thus you see the danger of assuming that we have now discovered an absolute truth, an absolute principle that can never be violated. Let me assure you that there are no such absolutes in the entire universe. If there is one absolute statement that could be made, it would be precisely this, that there are no absolutes in an unascended sphere. In an unascended sphere, everything is in flux, for everything is subject to the consciousness of the beings who created the sphere and those who now inhabit the sphere. Even the so-called laws of nature or laws of physics are not absolutes in the sense that people conceive of them today. They are subject to change over time, or rather as the material universe evolves towards its ultimate purpose, its ultimate outcome. My point here is to show you that scientists have already discovered certain phenomena that point to the fact that in the universe as a whole, energy is not conserved. If scientists were willing to employ precise enough measurements, they would notice that when they split the atom in a nuclear reaction, slightly more energy is released than can be accounted for by the energy that holds the atom together. If the scientists were able to make precise enough measurements, which currently is not possible, they would discover that in your physical sun, more energy is released than can be accounted for by the nuclear processes of the sun. In other words, both the atom and the physical sun are openings through which energy from a higher realm is streaming into the material universe. And this brings us back to my intent of explaining to you how a solar system can be constructed. As I said, there are beings in a higher realm who volunteer to become the open doors for delivering the driving power, the driving energy for creating the next sphere. A long time ago, two such beings volunteered to hold the spiritual focus for what then became your physical sun. Without a sun, no solar system could exist. Planet Earth could not exist, and it could not bring forth any life form that could be the basis for the expression of self-aware beings, what you today call human beings, but which are far more than what you currently conceive of. So the driving force, the very foundation, the very keystone for the construction of your solar system was that these two beings volunteered to extend a part of their beings into forming the open door through which energy from the spiritual realm can stream into the material frequency spectrum and be directed out into all directions as the driving force behind the very nuclear processes that power the physical sun. This then was the foundation that allowed other self-aware beings to step in and become the builders of the planets in your solar system. These beings had not attained the same level of consciousness as the two beings that volunteered to be the focus for your sun. They had attained a level of consciousness which I would like to call the Elohimic level of consciousness. This is to tie in with one of the names used in the Old Testament for God, namely that of Elohim. There are certain biblical scholars who realize that the name Elohim is not a singular name, but a plural name. Thus, the consequence is that Elohim is not a name that refers to the ultimate God, the one creator. It refers to a plurality of beings, and these were the beings who became what you might call the builders of form, and who combined their creative powers to create the planets of your solar system. There are 7 levels of the Elohim, but on each of the 7 levels there are 2 beings, one holding the masculine polarity, one holding the feminine polarity. These 7 Elohimic levels represent 7 distinct levels of high-frequency spiritual energy. They have, in esoteric teachings, often been referred to as the 7 rays. This name indicates that they are light frequencies of a certain vibration, and when these 7 light frequencies are combined, they are able to bring forth what you experience as material phenomena. In other words, the entire material universe is created out of the combination of these 7 spiritual energy frequencies, these 7 spiritual rays. Thus, the beginning of creation of the earth was that these 7 Elohim, these 14 beings, came together in the common decision to create the planet upon which you live. This was done for a twofold purpose. Partly to give the Elohim the opportunity to experiment with their level of creative ability in creating a planet, but also in creating a platform that would allow other spiritual beings to descend into the material frequency spectrum, take on bodies made of the substance that makes up that spectrum, and therefore experience that world from the inside. This has, as I have mentioned before, the twofold purpose of allowing these beings to grow in self-awareness so that they can expand their self-awareness, expand their co-creative abilities, and expand their appreciation for the intricate and infinitely beautiful world created by their ultimate creator and the spiritual hierarchy out of which they are extensions. So the Elohim then met in a higher realm and formulated the blueprint for planet Earth, including what life forms this planet would be able to bring forth, and thus what learning opportunities it would afford the beings who would descend upon it. After having formulated the blueprint for the Earth, the Elohim then began to use the blueprint as a foundation for applying information to the basic substance provided by the beings who hold the focus for the sun. In other words, the sun radiates the basic energy out of which planet Earth is made, and the Elohim then superimposed the information in the blueprint upon that energy. And over a long period of time, the blueprint that caused the energy from the sun to coalesce into the denser matter that makes up the physical planet. This was a very gradual process, and it was not the instantaneous creation described in the Bible. Nevertheless, if you are willing to interpret the story of Genesis creatively, you can conceive of the 7 days of creation as 7 time periods that correspond to the 7 spiritual rays I have just mentioned. Thus, the Elohim started by projecting the energies of the first ray, the blueprint of the first ray, onto the energies from the sun. Then the blueprint of the second ray was projected onto the energy from the sun, and so forth until finally the physical planet started appearing as if out of nowhere. Yet it did not appear out of nowhere, as I have explained that even a subatomic particle does not appear out of nowhere. It came into being. It appeared out of the higher frequency energy that cannot be detected by your physical senses and by material instruments. Thus, in a way, one might say that the blueprint that existed as a potential in a higher realm was brought into manifestation by being lowered into the material frequency spectrum. Now, my beloved, I earlier promised you to explain why it is so important for you to reconsider the paradigms found in your consciousness. Do you begin to see that when the Elohim created the physical planet Earth, they did so through their own consciousness? Each level of Elohim, the Elohim for each ray, held a blueprint of the Earth in their minds, and it was this blueprint that was superimposed upon the basic energy coming from the sun. If the blueprint held in the minds of the Elohim had been different, then the Earth would have been different, as indeed is proven by the other planets in your solar system that are very different from the Earth and therefore can sustain a very different life form than what you see on Earth. Now then, after the Earth was created, it took a certain time before the Earth had reached the level of manifestation that was able to support intelligent life forms. In other words, at a certain time in the very distant past, far beyond what science currently considers the origin of life on this planet, there were self-aware beings that started to descend onto planet Earth and take on a form of life on this planet. Take note that I am not saying these first self-aware beings took on the kind of physical bodies that you are currently wearing. Yet this is a topic I will not go into at this point. My aim is to show you that a very long time ago, self-aware beings started descending into the thought form of planet Earth. And from that moment, they then started co-creating the Earth along with the Elohim. Thus, the Earth started becoming a combination of the creative powers of the Elohim working from a higher level and the beings who were working from within the frequency spectrum of the planet Earth itself. For a very long time, the self-aware beings who descended to planet Earth were in complete unity with and complete alignment with the vision of the Elohim. Thus, what they added to the Earth, what they co-created on the Earth, was indeed an extension of an expansion of the blueprint created by the Elohim. At that time, planet Earth was in an ascending spiral of reaching greater and greater levels of beauty, complexity, harmony, balance, and sophistication. In those past, what we might call golden ages, there was none of the limitations and imbalances you currently see on Mother Earth. There were no natural disasters, so-called. There were no earthquakes, no volcanic eruptions, no tsunamis. There were no extremes of weather, such as hurricanes or droughts. There were no meteors that were able to penetrate the protective shield around the planet and create mass upheavals or extinctions. The beings who lived on planet Earth did not have the physical limitations you see today. They did not have diseases of their bodies. They did not ever lack for food or sustenance. And thus, They did indeed live in a state that is hardly conceivable for the people who today inhabit this planet in physical bodies. So, my beloved, can you now see where I have attempted to take you? Can you see that if you want to help bring the earth to a higher level, where some of the current limitations have been transcended, you need to begin to question the paradigms and beliefs that make these limitations seem like the inevitable consequences of natural laws that are beyond human control? My beloved, consider the fact that most of the religious philosophies found on this earth, and I'm here talking thousands of such philosophies found in many different cultures over the time span you call recorded history. Consider that most of these myths or thought systems contain the concept that in the distant past there was a more ideal state, and then somehow human beings fell out of that ideal state. And thus what you see today is not the original ideal state, whether you call it paradise or something else. Now, of course, for you to even begin to entertain this idea, you need to first overcome the paradigms imposed by orthodox religion and materialistic science. For even though Orthodox Christianity does talk about a state of paradise that human beings fell out of, they are not connecting that state to the physical earth. Instead, they see the physical earth as being separated from the kingdom of heaven, and therefore planet Earth is not able to outpicture the perfection of the kingdom of heaven. Instead, you need to rise into the heaven world in order to experience this perfection. Yet, what I am telling you is that planet Earth in past ages has indeed outpictured a state of beauty, balance, and harmony that people today can only conceive of as belonging to the heaven world. And thus it is indeed possible, and indeed the intention of the Elohim, that the earth will again outpicture this state of balance, beauty, and harmony. Yet for this to happen, human beings must be part of the co-creation of this new state. And how can human beings do this? They can do this only by raising their consciousness. On the other hand, materialistic science will also deny that the earth in the past has manifested a greater state of complexity and perfection than what you see today. Yet this is due again to the desire to uphold the materialistic paradigm, which is so based on the theory of evolution. This theory says that evolution can only go in one direction, namely from less sophisticated, less complex life forms toward more sophisticated, more complex life forms. And thus, in order to truly understand the role of human beings on this planet, the potential of human beings on this planet, you need to look beyond the scientific paradigm and realize that evolution can indeed go in both directions. Because evolution is not a mechanical, mindless process. It is a process that takes place in consciousness, and thus it is indeed affected by consciousness, including the consciousness of human beings. In other words, the Elohim did not create the earth in one instant creation. They set in motion an evolutionary process, and they are continuing to guide that evolutionary process, along with many other non-material beings to this day. Yet the evolutionary process of planet Earth is fundamentally affected also by the beings who inhabit bodies in the frequency spectrum of planet Earth. These beings, by combining the creative powers of their minds, are indeed able to change the physical environment on Earth within the limits defined by the Elohim. In other words, human beings do not have the creative powers, even if they combine the minds of all human beings on the earth to create planet Earth, nor do they have the power to destroy planet Earth. Yet they do indeed have the power to take the earth into a downward spiral that eventually ends up destroying the civilization human beings have created, even to the point of obliterating all physical traces of past civilizations. And thus you see that the history of the earth has been a process that has two distinct elements. In the distant past, waves of life streams descended to planet Earth and created very sophisticated civilizations. And then, after these life streams had learned the lessons that they could learn from planet Earth, after these life streams had mastered their creative abilities, as these abilities could be expressed on planet Earth, well, all of these waves of life streams ascended back to the spiritual realm from which they had descended. It is as Jesus says in the New Testament, "No man can ascend back to heaven, save he that descended from heaven." And thus, you see that in the distant history of planet Earth, waves of life streams descended to this planet and then ascended back. And as they ascended back, all traces of their civilizations were raised into a higher frequency spectrum, and that is why you will not ever find physical traces of these past civilizations. Do you see, my beloved, that this is another example of the observation horizon beyond which you cannot go? There simply are no physical traces of civilizations that have ascended from Earth in past epochs of history. Yet there is also another process, and it is that after a certain point, a shift happened on Earth. There now was a wave of life streams that descended, and they also brought forth a sophisticated civilization, far more sophisticated than what you see today. Yet in the end, a very large number of these life streams were not able to ascend, and therefore, instead of creating an ascension spiral for their civilization, they created a descension spiral. They gradually took their civilization and their level of consciousness into a self-destructive spiral. These life streams were able to affect even the physical environment on Earth to the point where they precipitated various events that literally obliterated most physical traces of their civilization. You will notice that even today, archaeologists have found certain signs of past civilizations that seem to have a level of sophistication that cannot be explained even by today's technology. Yet I can assure you that in the not too distant future, other traces of such civilizations will be discovered, until it will be impossible to uphold the current historical paradigm that past civilizations had been more primitive than the current civilization. This, of course, is another outcome of the materialistic desire to uphold materialism as the ultimate source of truth. So my point is that in the past, civilizations have self-destructed and even precipitated events that have been carried on in mythology as the biblical flood, or even the physically proven events of various ice ages. My beloved, just consider for a moment that where the great city of New York is situated today, there was not too long ago a very thick sheet of ice. Imagine that if such a sheet of ice again moved down and covered the area, then the current city of New York would be ground into dust. And when the ice retreated, it would seem as if there had never been a city in that location. So you see, indeed, that Mother Earth has certain physical processes that are quite capable of extinguishing most traces of past civilizations that could have been as sophisticated or more sophisticated than what you see today. Human beings in the modern world may think that they have built great monuments that will last forever. But you would be surprised at how quickly the natural processes of the earth could extinguish these monuments to the human ego and its desire for immortality in the material realm. There is no such thing as immortality in the material realm. That is, until the material realm itself ascends and becomes a self-luminous sphere in God's creation. So again, let me return to my premise on why it is so important for you to reconsider your paradigms. I have explained that the Elohim created a perfectly balanced and harmonious planet by superimposing the blueprint they held in their consciousness upon the basic substance that make up matter. I have explained that the self-aware beings who descended to Earth and took on bodies here then started to co-create based on the original blueprint. And I have now explained that the Earth in its current condition is far below the original balance and harmony envisioned by the Elohim. And this lower condition is a creation of the fact that over a long period of time, human beings have co-created by superimposing the images and beliefs held in their minds upon the basic substance that makes up matter itself. So can you see now that the current unbalanced conditions found on Earth are a product of the mental images, the blueprints that human beings have superimposed upon the original blueprint of the Elohim? This original blueprint has not in any way been destroyed. It still exists in the mind of the Elohim. Yet it has, so to speak, been covered over by the lower images superimposed by the minds of human beings. And therefore that original blueprint is not what you see as the actual reality on Earth. It only exists now in the realm of potentiality, in the realm of probability. What is the actual reality in the current time-space realm of Earth is the unbalanced and inharmonious blueprint created and held in the minds of human beings. And thus the absolutely only way that Mother Earth can shake off its current limitations is if human beings, at least a critical mass among human beings, are willing to take a critical look at the blueprints they hold in their minds and then question what they see as the unquestionable aspects of those blueprints. Only if a critical mass of human beings will begin to question their beliefs about the Earth and the material universe will they be able to throw out some of the limiting mental images they hold and replace them with the higher mental images currently held in the minds of the Elohim and other spiritual beings. And only when human beings begin to accept and internalize these higher mental images and therefore direct their awareness through those mental images, well, my beloved, only then will the basic substance that makes up the Earth begin to take on those higher images. And thus do you now see why it is so essential for you to begin to question what you have been brought up to believe cannot or should not be questioned? You must overcome the fear that by questioning the dogmas of your childhood religion, you will be condemned to hell by an angry God in the sky. You must realize that, instead, the loving God in the spiritual realm will only welcome you to question any limitation and instead realize and accept what Jesus meant when he said, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." It is indeed the pleasure of the Elohim to give you a planet that has complete harmony and balance, so that it can meet all of your physical and spiritual needs. It is not the design of the Elohim to have a planet where people have a limited lifespan due to diseases or old age, or where 2/3 of the population live below the poverty level with millions of children starving to death every year. The Elohim hold a much higher vision for this planet, and they would be happy to see it outpictured instantly. And indeed, it could be outpictured almost instantly if enough people were to accept this higher vision with the same sense of reality that they currently accept the limited conditions that they see around them. And thus, you must also be willing to question the scientific projection that the Earth is a material, mechanical creation that must obey certain laws that are beyond the power of the human mind. You will not become an unintelligent, superstitious idiot by questioning the materialistic paradigm, for it is indeed as limiting as the idea that the Earth was flat. You will become a much more free a much more aware being by realizing that the fundamental reality of the material universe is that everything is a creation of consciousness, and thus your consciousness can indeed affect your material circumstances, and the collective consciousness of humankind can indeed affect the material circumstances found on this planetary home. I can assure you that in the not too distant future, people will be looking back at the current materialistic paradigm, and they will see it as being just as primitive as the belief in a flat earth. Thus, if you are willing to be a forerunner for the shift in consciousness that is already beginning to happen, but has not yet broken through in the awareness of most people, then come along with me, as I will take you on a journey that will help you question what you have been programmed to believe cannot or should not be questioned.